Hi, and welcome back to my channel. I'm Tariq. If you're new, welcome, and make sure to subscribe and to watch my last videos. So in my last video, I talked about ascension, what it is, and what it looks like. Today, I'm talking about my own ascension process. I consider my process to still be ongoing, but I'd like to share what I have experienced so far. So in my first video, I mentioned starting to smoke in January of last year. Before I started smoking, I felt very dissociated. I went through a lot of trauma as a kid, and because of it, the world looked very dull and lifeless to me. I was in school not because I wanted to be, but because I felt like it was just the next step in life. I remember moving through life like a robot, just going to class, then going home. I didn't feel anything except for when I was having sex, going to a party, eating, or engaging in the toxic relationship I was in. I mention these things because they sound normal, but a lot of people use these ordinary things to self-harm, and they can become an addiction if you're using them to feel like I was. Eventually, I started wondering if there was more to life. I would wonder about this from time to time, but for the most part, I was still engaged in the routine of life and not really asking too many questions. The friends I had at the time weren't interested in that kind of thing, and whenever I brought it up, they kind of just laughed, shrugged their shoulders, and changed the subject. This situation progressed on into my second year of college. Shortly after I started the year, I broke up with my boyfriend after a year of a stagnant relationship, and at the same time, I stopped being friends with both of my friends who still lived in the same apartment as me. I felt so alone and misunderstood, I cried and fantasized about committing suicide. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, and I thought life was so pointless. But I didn't commit suicide. I went to counseling instead. By the way, I highly recommend counseling. Most of us have experienced trauma in our lives, and going to someone who won't judge you and can help you see things from a third point of view can be really helpful. I went and they diagnosed me with PTSD from the trauma I experienced as a child and prescribed me with 2 medications, one for anxiety and one for helping me sleep. I tried one of the medications and my body hated it. I threw both away and continued to go to talk therapy. I started feeling better, but I still knew there was something missing. I went home for the break thinking about this and figured the thing missing in my life was meaningful relationships. So when I got back to school in January, I started making new friends and ended up with this group of girls who always looked cool to me. I hung out with them a few times, and one time they were like, "We're going to drink and smoke. Want to join?" And I was like, "Yeah." It was my first time doing either. We got drunk and went to a party, then we smoked in the bathroom when we got back. We were smoking a bong. I was instantly fried. I started talking about being outside of my body and crying because the girls said they were going to Waffle House and I was certain we were all going to crash and die. I was freaking everyone out, but a lot of them still ended up going while me and 2 other girls stayed behind. I've always been an observer, but my senses were so heightened I could easily feel the tension between them, and they were shading each other so hard but pretending they were joking. It was like their true feelings for each other had no choice but to come out in the state we were in. I was just sitting back watching and listening. The other girls came back and it was more shade and more tension, and it made me wonder why they hung out with each other if they didn't like each other. I was already thinking about fake love, fake friends, and fake relationships after losing my 2 best friends and my boyfriend, who I thought would be in my life forever. They stopped being friends with me over nothing, basically, and I found out he was cheating. So all of that, plus coming into a pre-established group of friends and seeing the holes in their relationships, was really just making me question everything. Fast forward to the second time I smoked, and this time it was just me and one other girl. We smoked and we got high, and we just started talking and talking. And at one point I realized this girl was saying everything I was thinking in my head, word for word. She realized I was doing the same for her, and we both confirmed we weren't tripping, and we really were. hearing and speaking each other's thoughts. After that night, for 3 days, I was stuck on a higher consciousness. I couldn't just return to thinking about what time I had class and what I was going to eat for dinner. Me and her started spending a lot more time together, talking about, learning about, and exploring this new world we have found that felt so much more real and made so much more sense than the world we were born into. So God is a creative being. Creating the earth was all about experiences and magic, so why does our society ridicule and discourage creativity in favor of math and logic? I started having thoughts and conversations like these, and gradually I started to detach from the 3D world, although I didn't have that name for it at the time. I started thinking about who I was beyond my name, my age, my race, and other identifiers that society gives us. I went to class less and talked to people more. I found that I had gifts. I could read people so well, it was almost like I was reading their minds. I didn't know what to do with all this new information, and besides the girl I had discovered it with, most people I was around didn't understand me, and they usually weren't interested in what I was saying, and it was discouraging and frustrating at times, but I kept going. I knew my experiences were real, and I couldn't just go back to living a regular life after that, not when there was a whole world out there hidden in plain sight. So in my first video, I mentioned 420 being significant, and it was. It was so significant that now I consider it to be my second birthday. Before that day, I was starting to notice signs, but I didn't really know much about what synchronicities were. I did know about the law of attraction, but that was about as far as I knew. Synchronicities are like coincidences, except coincidences don't exist. Synchronicities are the universe's way of telling us we're in the right place at the right time. So that day, I told myself I would follow my intuition wherever it led me, and literally, it was like following a map. Sign after sign, I was just following them throughout the day, and I met so many important people. I met the girl who gave me my first crystal and introduced me to the concept of twin flames, and when we went back to her house, I realized I was there earlier that same day buying weed from her boyfriend. I met a guy who I swore was going to be my future husband because I felt so comfortable with him, and he had a gray, blue-nosed pit bull named Azul, and earlier that day, I saw a baby, gray, blue-nosed pit bull named Blue. I also found $20 in the ground going into the store when I was with him, and I used it to pay for my things because I had left my money at home without even realizing. So after that day, I just started going outside every day with that same exact mindset that I was going to let the universe guide me, and that was when I first started understanding I had a gift of communicating too. I had stopped going to class altogether, and I would spend my days going around meeting people and listening to their problems, giving them advice or messages from God. I would literally be hearing God's, or maybe it was an angel's voice in my head, and saying whatever they were saying to me to the person I was talking to. I was planning to drop out, but a friend of mine convinced me to just take a semester off, and I did, in Ohio. I went home in May. I spent the summer processing through what had happened that school year, studying, meditating, and opening my third eye. I would take walks every morning, and I would meditate laying down in the grass on my back, looking up at the sky. I started having out-of-body experiences, and I started being able to differentiate when I was in a different dimension, which I came to understand as pockets of time and space. As with all journeys, there were obstacles. The more I investigated inwardly, the more I saw of myself and some things I did not want to face. Also, it became harder to communicate with the people around me and to be present doing everyday things such as working because my mind wasn't really present in earthly matters. After months of soul searching, I hit this wall inside of myself, and it caused me to fall into a dark night of the soul. A dark night of the soul is when the soul goes through a dark period that can seem endless and impossible to escape. It allows us to feel pain and experience darker parts of the self such as anger, harmful tendencies, and painful memories, which is important because when becoming enlightened, the light entering your body must touch all of your darkest parts in order for you to face and understand the true nature of the self. During this time, I did a lot of crying, praying, meditating, and transmuting negative energy through the use of crystals and incense. It was important for me to keep going, even under the scrutiny of friends and family who didn't really understand what I was experiencing. And really, I didn't have a choice but to keep going because there was no turning back at that point. When I finally made it through, I was able to recognize the strength and power I had inside of myself, and I realized all pain, whether it is physical or emotional, is bearable because it's all in your mind. All it takes is patience, self-control, and taking the time to breathe, literally. Breathing slowly and focusing on the pain instead of being afraid to feel it helped me to face it and to get over it. Now I am in a much better headspace, and going through that dark period helped me to understand myself and what I want to do, and that I can do it because I'm that powerful. As I mentioned before, my ascension process is still ongoing. The things I do to carry on with my process are studying, journaling, taking good care of my physical and emotional bodies, communicating with my angels through numbers when I need guidance, and learning to listen to my own inner intuition and how to apply it. I am proud to say I came a long way, and I look forward to the rest of my journey and seeing the upcoming changes in my life. So that was my ascension process. Feel free to comment below the things you found interesting or anything that resonated with you. So you can like, comment, share, subscribe, and thank you for watching.